The wind curled through the town like it remembered something no one else did. Sun hung low and wide over the rooftops, painting the dusk gold and the shadows long. Horses blinked slow in their stalls. A dog barked once, then lay back down. The buildings leaned like tired men, crooked, splintered, sun-bleached. In the heat, even the saloon's piano had fallen quiet, its notes swallowed by the air. Then came the sound of hooves. Not rushed, not wandering, purposeful, like they knew exactly where they were headed. The stranger came riding in, straight-backed in the saddle, boots polished, hat brim low enough to keep his eyes hidden. His suit was too fine for this place now, but the dust touched him anyway, rising in swirls as if drawn to what it used to know. He dismounted without a word, tied his horse to the rail with a practiced hand. People glanced at him, then away, like ghosts nodding to one of their own. He walked slow, each step a memory laid underfoot. The blacksmith's forge, still sweating smoke. The church spire, bent by last winter's wind. And there, the boarding house porch, cracked paint, empty chair, where a girl once leaned against the post, bare feet tucked under her skirt, humming a tune that never had a name. He paused just a breath. Eyes flicked left. The well, dry now. But once they'd pulled water from it together, laughing, arguing. Her hand had slipped once, and he caught her by the wrist, the bucket rolling off into the dust. He'd held her too long. Neither said a word. Her cheeks had flushed like sunrise over canyons. He moved on. He told himself he was here for cattle business. A ranch expansion. Nothing else. Just lines on parchment and handshakes over whiskey. But his heart betrayed him. It wandered, ahead of him, beside him, like a dog that remembered a trail better than its master. She was the kind of girl who made silence feel like conversation. Laughed with her whole face, but only once she trusted you. She used to race him through the tall grass behind the barn, always barefoot, always faster. Stubborn as old roots and just as deep. They'd carved initials into the bark of a sycamore tree by the creek. Half-hearted at first, then again, deeper, until sap bled like a vow neither of them could name. Then came the day he rode off. Promises unfinished. Dreams measured in dollars and fences. She asked him to stay. Voice soft but firm. The way women ask when they still believe men can be convinced. He told her he'd come back richer. She didn't want richer. He never wrote. Not once. Years passed. They said she married a man who wore silk vests and sweet words. A gambler. He had hands too soft for work and a grin too quick to trust. He left her when the winnings ran dry. Left her with nothing but debts and cold floors. She disappeared from porches and prayers, folded into places decent folks didn't go. They whispered about a kitchen in the edge of town, a back room in a dressmaker's shop, a woman with tired eyes and quiet hands who never asked for kindness, but gave it anyway. He stopped at the saloon steps. The sun dipped lower, shadows sharpening. Laughter spilled out from inside. Boots stomped against the warped floorboards. A barkeep shouted for someone to quit climbing the damn piano. He was about to walk in, shake off the ghosts and the heat when the sound changed. A hush rolled in, then a voice. Next lot, $1. Starting bid, $1. Debt settlement. He froze. One woman, strong hands, quiet tongue. His body turned before his mind could catch up. And there she was, standing on a wooden crate, face still, shoulders straight, not ashamed, not anymore, but hollow in a way only survival can carve. Her hair pinned back with the same quiet dignity she always wore. Eyes that once danced now watched the crowd without blinking. No one moved. No one bid. The rancher felt his ribs tighten, his breath go shallow. Something inside him cracked, quiet but deep, like the splitting of old bark in a long drought. There she was, and here he was, and between them, a silence 10 years wide, a silence about to be broken. Dust still hung in the air, slow to settle. She stepped down from the crate like a woman unchained, though no one had moved to cut the ropes. The crowd had thinned already. Shame is a quick-footed thing. A few men muttered, adjusted their hats, looked at the sky as if blaming it for what they'd just watched. The rancher stood still. He hadn't bid. He couldn't. Not with her standing proud like that. Not with the past between them thick as river silt. If he'd raised a hand, it would have made her small, made her his, and she had never belonged to anyone. It was the farmer who did it. A tall man with a soft gait and earth-colored sleeves rolled to his elbows. He stepped forward, offered the dollar without flinching. No es milk, no leer, no spectacle. Just a quiet nod, like he was tipping his hat to her soul. She didn't look at him, but when he spoke low, almost shy, the whole town leaned in to hear. Just figured no one deserves that kind of stage. Then he turned and walked away. The rancher's throat dried as the woman he once knew stood there for a long moment. Not stunned, just still, like a church after the hymn's been sung. Then she stepped off the crate, dusted her skirt, straightened her back, and walked away from the square. He followed from a distance, enough to watch her shadow without stepping on it. She lived now in the loft of an old barn on the edge of town, the kind of place that smelled of rain and would rot in horses too old for work but too loved to be put down. She fed them carrots with her palms flat, rubbed ointment into their joints with the patience of a widow preparing a final letter. She delivered bread before the sun had the chance to blink, tied her hair with a strip of muslin, wore the same boots every day, cracked at the ankle, soles stitched twice over. People didn't speak her name in town. Not out loud. Not anymore. He found her once near the water pump, filling buckets with a rhythm that matched the birdsong. He offered her help. She didn't scowl, didn't turn cold, just said gently, "I've carried heavier than this. But thank you." He said he was sorry. For leaving. For not writing. For being the kind of man who chooses gold over roots. She tilted her head, eyes unreadable. The world doesn't give what it takes back. You have to grow around the missing. That night, he sat under the sycamore tree. The carving was still there, but moss had crept through the lines. The bark had split in new directions. Still growing. He saw her again in the morning, hauling bread to town, cartwheels creaking like knees in winter. He rode beside her a while. They spoke of horses and sunrises and the time she'd stolen his hat and made him chase her through the cornrows. He asked about the gambler. She told the truth like one sweeping ash from hearth. He left debts in my name. Gambled everything down to the spoons. When the bankers came, I told them I had nothing. They didn't care. That auction? It wasn't legal, but it was real. They wanted me humbled, quiet, gone. He said he'd fix it. She said, "Don't mistake my struggle for needing rescue." And then, for the first time in years, she smiled, a quiet, moonlit smile that didn't reach the corners of her mouth but burned all the same. Later that week, the farmer came by. No fanfare, just a basket of eggs and a folded cloth with butter he'd churned himself. She met him on the porch. They didn't speak much, but she looked at him differently, like she recognized the way his hands rested on the basket. Like she saw kindness, not as something loud, but steady, scarred, earned. The rancher watched from a distance. Wealth meant nothing now. He owned 1,000 acres and couldn't stand in the space between her and that farmer. One morning, he rode alongside her cart again. He pointed toward the sycamore tree as they passed. She said, "That tree still grows, though we stopped carving." He didn't answer. There was nothing to say. Then came the banker. From the city. Clean-shaven. Eyes like coins. He stepped into the barn with papers in hand, voice flat as an anvil. "The loft you sleep in, it ain't yours. Your husband forged the deed. Property's not just claimed, it's owned." She held the rail of the ladder. Her fingers didn't tremble. "So what now? You'll be evicted. Or worse. Fraud's a crime, whether you signed it or not." The rancher, watching from the barn door, stepped forward at last, ready to burn his money to fix what love had broken. But even then, she stood between the banker and the wind. Alone, not afraid, and not yet defeated. The storm rolled in slow and sullen, like a sorrow long held back. Gray hung heavy over the fields, and the wind called out through the rafters like an old friend no one wanted to answer. Her loft took the brunt of it, a soft drip in the far corner at first, then a steady leak that fell in time with her breath. She was patching it herself when he came, not the rancher, but the farmer. He didn't speak much, just handed her a roll of canvas and a coil of twine, then climbed the ladder beside her. They worked in silence, shoulders brushing now and then. Rain pattered above, soft like a lullaby or a secret told gently between two people who know pain. By the time they were done, her fingers were numb and the world had turned silver outside. She offered him bread, warm from the morning, and he accepted it with a quiet nod. Before he left, he paused by the door. "You ever need help?" he said. "Just ask. Help's not always a debt." She smiled then, not out of gratitude, but out of recognition that he understood the difference. Later that night, just as the thunder began to roll again, the rancher appeared. His coat was soaked through, his hat dripping, boots heavy with mud. He didn't knock, just stood at the bottom of the ladder, rain still clinging to his shoulders like guilt. He held a satchel, didn't say a word, just opened it and laid the contents on her work table. Letters, dozens of them, some yellowed, some creased, none sent. She touched them like old bones. Picked one up. Read the first line aloud. "You were the only thing I ever wanted that didn't come with a price tag." Her hands trembled, but not from the cold. "Why didn't you send these?" she asked. He looked down, eyes somewhere between shame and surrender. "Because wanting you was the only truth I ever had, and I didn't know how to say it without ruining it." She read another. The ink had bled where a teardrop, or maybe rain, had struck it. She asked, "Did you come back for me, or for guilt?" And he didn't flinch. "I came back for land," he said, "but I stay because you were standing on it." She didn't cry. Her eyes had long since learned restraint. But when she handed him the letter back, her fingers brushed his, and that tiny touch carried more weight than a lifetime of apologies. In the days that followed, the rhythm of her world didn't change much. She still delivered bread, still nursed the tired horses, and lit the stove at dawn. But one evening, as shadows stretched long, she sat beside the farmer on a bench he'd built with his own calloused hands. They watched fireflies blink into life across the field, soft as whispers. He turned toward her, voice like worn leather. "You don't know the world you're ruin." She said nothing, just rested her hand on the arm of the bench, close, not quite touching his, but closer than before. At night, she taught him to read. He fumbled syllables like a man picking his way across river stones, and she corrected him with the gentlest touch, laughter blooming in her chest like a flower she'd forgotten how to water. He built her a bread oven out back, stone by stone, the mortar mixed with care and quiet pride. She didn't ask for it. He didn't ask for thanks. Meanwhile, the rancher changed. Quietly, he sold a portion of his land, the flat stretch that bordered the canyon, rich in grass and ready for cattle. No one knew. He signed the papers at dusk and left the money with the banker, the same one who threatened her with eviction. The debts disappeared. She found out a week later. Not from him, from the bank clerk who mispronounced her name but smiled like he'd done her a favor. She stormed to the ranch house on a cold morning, shawl wrapped tight, boots streaked with frost. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked. He didn't step forward, just leaned on the porch rail, eyes low. "Because I'm trying to become the kind of man who doesn't need thanks." She didn't reply, but her silence softened, not forgiveness, but something that came before it. That evening, she walked to the churchyard as the last light faded, skies painted in pink and violet and bruised gold. The farmer was there, sitting on the steps, hat in his lap. He looked up, didn't rise, just offered a slow smile, soft as a lullaby. "You're not a burden," he said. "You're a whole season." She didn't speak, just looked at the spot beside him. He didn't ask for her hand, didn't beg, just offered the chair beside his with a glance. She didn't sit, not yet, but she stayed. And together, they watched the sun let go of the day. The gambler came back just as the frost began to lift from the earth. Filthy boots, greasy hair, slicked like charm that had long since turned to oil. He staggered into town like he owned it, drunk on debt and desperation, waving a crumpled piece of paper and a voice loud enough to summon ghosts. She was walking back from the mill when he stepped into her path. "You still got my name?" he hissed, holding out the marriage paper like a noose. The ink was smeared, the seal forged, but the threat behind it was real. He knew what to say, how to say it, weaving lies like threadbare cloth. Claimed he'd take her back, or take the rancher's gold instead. Said he could make trouble if he didn't get what he was owed. Said she was still his. She didn't run, didn't shout, just turned and walked toward the courthouse, her boots leaving quiet prints in the thawing earth. Word spread by sundown. The whole town stirred. By morning, the chairs were filled. She stood at the front, hands folded, not trembling, not bowed. The gambler lounged like a snake, pretending charm, pretending rights he'd long since forfeited. The rancher came and took a seat at the back. The farmer came and stood beside her. But it was her voice the room heard first. She didn't raise it, didn't need to. A woman is not livestock, she said. Not property, not yours to sell and reclaim. I walked out your house with nothing, and nothing is what you get from me now. The gambler laughed, a wet, bitter sound. But she opened her satchel and laid the truth bare. Witness accounts, a note he'd once scrawled while drunk, even an old preacher's letter that said she'd left of her own accord. Then she did something no one expected. She stepped aside and let the judge read her final page aloud. It was a town record. The auction. One woman. Sold for $1. A moment meant to humiliate. Now the noose tightening around the gambler's own neck. The judge's voice dropped low. You sold her like a mule. That was your last word on her. So let it be your last word, period. He tossed the forged marriage papers into the courthouse brazier. The flames licked them clean. Ash rose like ghosts, and the gambler was escorted out, cursing a town that no longer listened. When the dust settled, the people did not cheer. They nodded. Justice, when quiet, speaks louder than any shout. Later that evening, the rancher stood outside his rented room. A single bag packed, hat tilted against the wind. He was leaving, not because he'd lost, but because staying would have been a different kind of theft. He looked at the spot where she'd once stood on the crate, back straight, eyes unflinching. Now she stood before him again. No tears, just truth. You were my first heartbreak, she said, but not my last hope. He didn't move, didn't breathe. And you, she added, her voice soft now, you helped me without asking to be loved again. That matters. She placed something in his palm, small, light, a locket. Inside, pressed like memory and mercy, a wildflower, the kind that grew near the sycamore. He opened his mouth, closed it. She walked away before he could decide what silence meant. By spring, the town bloomed in ways it never had. The school opened with a single bell, handmade desks, and her handwriting on every wall. The farmer built the fence himself, painted it white. Kids ran through the yard chasing kites and chalk dust, and her smile, at last, had no apology behind it. As for the rancher, he didn't vanish. He just changed. He bought a small cabin near the river, quiet, unseen, and started writing. Not about cattle, not about wealth, but about a woman once auctioned for $1, and how her worth could never be named. One book ended with words like these. Some hearts break like glass. Others bend like grass and wind. But the lucky ones, they take root again. Not where they first bloomed, but where they were planted last, by gentler hands. And if you ever pass through that town, you might hear an old-timer whisper. Not all roads take you back, but sometimes the best endings are the ones you never planned. Like a woman once sold for $1, who proved her worth could never be priced.